Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is decomposing fractions, which is probably not something you've heard of before. If you have, awesome. If not, that's okay too. But I want you to think about, what does a decomposer mean in science? Well, it's an organism that breaks things down, that makes things break back apart so that it can be used by other organisms. Well, decomposing fractions is very much the same thing. You're breaking it back down. So decomposing fractions just means breaking down fractions. Okay, so if I start with the fraction 3/4, I have 3 1/4 pieces, so here's my 1, but I'm missing one of those fourths, so this is the fraction 3/4. I'm going to think about being able to break that into pieces. I can take it and have 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. Okay. And when I do that, when I stick them all back together, I get that 3/4 again. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. You can break it into, they call these are called unit fractions. Okay, and they call them that because you have 1. I have 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. Now, what if I take my 3/4, I'm going to keep the same fraction, and what if I break it into 2/4 plus 1/4? If I do that, do I still get them to be 3/4 when I put them back together? Well, yeah. I have 2/4 here and 1/4 here. I stick them back together, and I still have 3/4. Now, also remember that you have your commutative property for addition, so it would be the same thing. You could also say 1/4 plus 2/4. Those are all ways that you could make 3/4. Now, when you have something like fourths or 3/4, there's not a whole lot of combinations you could make. But when you get into those fractions that are a little bit, have more pieces, like tenths or twelfths or even eighths, you start to have more options of ways to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and get out some eighths. I'm going to use a different piece of paper. So here, let's do 6/8. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they are my eighths pieces of my fraction tower. So I have 6/8 is what I'm starting with. One of the best ways to decompose your fraction the first time is just to go ahead and break it into those unit fractions. So I would have 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. 1/8. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eighths. I have 6 of them and they're all 1/8. So remember that it's called a unit fraction whenever it's got that 1 in the numerator. I broke it into units. I broke it into 1. So again, these are called unit fractions. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to having 6/8 again. I'm going to think of different ways I could break that up. Could I say 1/8 plus 5/8? If I stick them back together, does it still equal 6/8? Yeah. 1/8 plus 5/8 is the same thing. Stick them back together, I get 6/8. What if I have 2/8 plus 4/8? Well, if I stick them back together, I still have 6/8. Could I say 3/8 plus 3/8? Yeah, sure. Because 3/8 plus 3/8, still stick them back together, you get 6/8. Okay, so you can break it into where you have two fractions. Well, all right, what if I have 1/8? I'm still gonna start back with my 6/8. 1/8 plus 2/8 plus 3/8. If I stick all those back together, I still get 6/8. So that's just another way that I could break it up. 1/8 plus 2/8 plus 3/8. Now, as you can see, there's lots and lots and lots of ways to break up even the fraction 6/8. So you can imagine once you get to 12ths, this isn't even all of the ways you can do that. Okay, there's so many ways that you could break it up. Anyway, as long as you have 8ths as your denominator and your numerators add up to that numerator that you had, which in my case was 6. Now, one of the ways that I have seen this asked on a test was something like they gave a circle and it was broken into 8ths, and they said something to the effect of which of the following represents the picture below. And they had something that theirs was actually a little bit different because they had theirs was like polka dots and stripes and solid or something like that, or just 3 different shades of gray. But if it asked you which of these represents this picture, and it gave you some options, even if they all added up to 6/8, do you see how here in my picture I have 1/8 that's pink, I have 2/8 that's blue, and 3/8 that are green? So the way that this one is decomposed would show this picture. They may give you an answer choice like 6/8 equals 3/8 plus 3/8. They may give you that as an option. They may give you 6/8 equals 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8, which these are true statements, but they don't represent this picture. Okay, so if you're decomposing fractions, and they ask you a question like this, make sure that you think about, what does this picture really mean? Okay, because I have 1/8 here, and then these two together are 2/8, and these 3 together are 3/8. Another question that I've seen is something that asks you about says which of the following decomposes the fraction into unit fractions. And you may have these exact same answer choices. But the only one that breaks it into unit fractions is this one where you've got only ones in your numerator. So remember, unit fractions mean you have one in that numerator, and decomposing fractions is just breaking it down into smaller pieces. So instead of having 6/8, you have those smaller bites of your fraction.